currently Firebrand is probably the most important class in the World versus World there is. Your primary role is to ensure that every other person in your party is able to do what they need to do. The main ways you'll be doing this are swiftness to make sure they can keep up, stay on tag. You'll be providing a lot of protection to just make sure people aren't getting hit by the big damaging burst and going down straight away. Ability, which just allows your people to actually press the buttons they need to press. And then you can do quite a lot with Aegis as well, which allows you to survive the initial bomb. First build I'll be covering is the one I run. It's a relaxed, new player friendly build. You'll be running full minstrel for the tankiness. Run durability, she gives you much higher boon uptime, and the toughness makes you way tanky. It's just a good rune set and it's pretty cheap, so you can access it at any level. For weapons, be running staff on minstrel with concentration and energy. Energy is because every time you're rolling, you're outputting quite a lot of healing. In general, like, you can roll a lot to reposition to be where you need to be and to cover a lot of people that get caught out. Then for your other weapon set, two major choices are picking between mace and axe.
Transference is plus 10% healing, yeah.
Yeah, I don't bother with transference because you're not a full healer and you'll benefit a lot more from the additional uptime on your Aegis from some of the skills. Even though it gets popped in one hit, it means you can pop it early, have your skill back, and then renew it.
So you wouldn't have transference on your mice or anything?
Personally, no, I don't run it.
What would you put on it? Energy?
Yeah, energy and concentration is what I run on the offhand as well.
Perfect.
Because you get a lot more healing from just rolling the additional time. Every time you're in combat, you get another roll, and it's a lot safer because you want to be swapping weapons quite a bit. And how I play Firebrand. For your other weapon set, obviously you can run axe. Mace is safer and gives good Aegis, provides a little bit of regen that will usually be overridden by your healers, but it's also a light field. Light fields are very good. You do get a light field from the axe, but axe promotes playing more aggressively than you really should be, at least when learning. For now, I generally say run mace until you're consistently able to survive. You don't need the axe pull. You have tone 1 pull and you have reapers pulling 900 to feet, which is generally enough. All jewelry is minstrels.
Is there a better decision to go for than concentration if cost isn't an issue?
Like bounty, you can run. It's the extra concentration stacking is nice, and overall, even assuming cost, I would generally run concentration at this point. So, covering traits. One of the things I like about it is there's a lot of small tweaks to the build that you can run. Most traits have a perfectly fine opinion. I just generally find this is the most relaxed variant. You'll be running, usually you run these 3 trees for like this build. You're blocking a huge amount, so getting the boost from Bulwark's good, and the main reason is the skill cooldown reduction. It allows your 2 and your 3 to be used a lot more regularly, and your 3 is a really good way to cover stab rotation, because the Aegis will take the hit and burst to block more. Since the changes a while back, you can't really maintain as much stab, so you need to be a lot smarter about using it. You heal quite a lot from your dodge roll. It's a nice trait. It allows you to pick up slack. Pure of Heart is, again, just more general healing. It allows you to just get more from what you're doing anyway. It's very good. You could run the protective barrier. It's decent. It means every time you res, you create the bubble, and then so long as you're using your shield regularly, you can actually help res quite a bit using the 3%, because that applies on your normal shield and the thing. That requires like more overhead. It's easier to just run the things that boost you passively. Concentration from staff, I don't think is worth over the healing. Just having extra regen from passive's nice. The Grandmaster trait gets a lot of argument. I run Pure Voice because it converts conditions to boons, which, if you're targeting it more, is really, really useful. Like, you know when you're going to be hit by boons in a fight when you're more experienced. Like, you can expect an immob bomb. You convert immob into resist, which then just massively helps. But you can run either of the other two. Big symbols I wouldn't run unless you're running a specific build. Force of Will is a really big spike to your healing. So if you're focusing more on that while you're playing, I would say it's a good skill to run, especially if you're only running Stand Your Ground. If you're running Advance, I think that Pure Voice is the better trait. The second trait line, just more boons, it's nice passive. Consecration's 2-second duration, I say, is mandatory if you're running Hallowed Ground, and generally you should be. The extra 2 seconds is another 2 pulses, which massively helps. It makes it last longer than a lot of the stripped fields, which is the main contestant. You're not running Hammer, so that's you getting a bit of cleanse when you pop your 2. It's nice, it's nothing huge, but you use 2 to cover your 3 every time you pull it out. Pretty much, it's a nice small improvement. You run this mostly for Virtue Reduce Recharge in this build. You run Indomitable Courage, which is the third one, because that turns pulling out your book into a instant cast stun break for your allies. Is the main thing. The shorter interval doesn't matter. 30 seconds versus 40 seconds for an extra Aegis tick isn't that important in the build. And then Firebrand traits. The main contenders are quickness on your heal skill, which I would run if you're running Signet and not expecting another quickness source in your party. I would definitely run that. I don't think you should really run Signet if you're not running quickness on your heal, and then you should make sure that you're syncing that. You don't want to cast it without it, because 2 seconds is too long, you'll miss the cast. And then the 3 extra pages is why I advise most groups run if you're running open field. In a GVG group, the 3 pages isn't useful because the fight will be over before then, but 3 extra pages is a full free casting of your Tome 2, page 5, which massively boosts all of the healing you get. Converts a lot of conditions. It's a very good skill for helping bunker against siege and cloud. The only one that I say gets more value in most forms of open field would be your reflect. For the second one, the extra quickness isn't great here, but it's free and it allows you to apply some quickness without caring because you're going to be applying so much Aegis and stab, but the internal cooldown isn't controllable. And then Grandmaster, you run the third trait on pretty much every single build, because you don't care too much about keeping your passive on your F2, but the 2 seconds off each page is a really, really big deal. 8 seconds for a page regen is too slow. Running the trait brings it down to 6. That's a summary of the traits. Going over utilities, which is where you make a lot of your trait choices, but you'll run the heal mantra. It's just best in slot. There's no reason not to. Stand Your Ground, you'll always be running Stand Your Ground. It's Shout, it's a personal stun break, it's your big stab. It applies a lot of stacks that last a long time, and this is probably one of your most important skills. It's like vital for maintaining as much stabs as you can. Hallowed Ground, you get huge field. It's fire field, you can blast it for might, but you should drop your Hallowed Ground and Holy Strike at your feet because you'll be bunkering, and the small boost to might will help cover quite a lot. It lasts a long time. It's just if you're if you're either crossing a dangerous thing or pushing in, you should have a Hallowed Ground in front. Luckily, a lot of commanders will call when to use it, which is another nice thing about Firebrand. A lot of commanders lead on it, so you get a lot of help with when to time your skills.
Perfect.
And then each Hallowed Ground pulses separately, so if you drop 2, they'll still target priority, but you do get more Hallowed Grounds. Third skill is your main choice here, because it depends entirely on how comfortable you are, whether or not you're able to call out on voice, and a few other things. If you're running quickness, feel free to run Signet. If you're on voice, this isn't a res skill you can just run. Signet needs to be cooled because it's so long cooldown, so focused, and like such a investment that you need to make sure you're getting value out of it, because it's a really good range revive. It requires the long cast time, and you need to make sure you have either enough dodge to cancel or stow weapon can cancel. A fun quirk is if you're in a book you can't stow it, so you can't cancel if you have a tome out. That's something you need to be aware of. But yeah, if you're doing that run Liberator's Vow, cast your heal skill, and then enter Signet, that cuts the time down a lot. If you're not running Signet for any of the reasons, the skills I would recommend, Advance is the most friendly one. It combines with Pure Voice, so you can convert a lot of conditions, and it gives Aegis Swiftness. Aegis will then burst for healing. Swiftness helps just keep the uptime if you can't get into staff often enough. It's just a nice skill, short cooldown, not very punishing to run. If your commander wants it, or if you think that you're comfortable enough reading engages, you can run the two other skills I would say is you can run Sanctuary. This is growing massively popular. You'll drop this on a melee fight, so if we're like on tag and the enemy's here, as soon as you get into melee, you can drop your sanctuaries there, and it breaks a lot of their push. So as they try to push, any that don't have stab get knocked back, and any that do have stab have one stack of it removed. The other option is you can drop it on yourselves when bunkering, gives a lot of projectile protection, very useful when we're not running many Vindicators, but its biggest priority is using it for CC disrupting a melee fight. If you're running that, feel free to switch to the third trait over Pure Voice, because the extra healing will come up more often than you'll stand your ground. Third one, I would generally say, I don't see many running, is Healing Bow. I run this occasionally, most of the time I'm running a Signet though. If you're running Bow of Truth, you definitely run the third heal trait here. Bow of Truth is really nice because it's a lot of consistent small heals when you're on a fight. So as soon as you enter a clash, you can just drop it on the thing, and it helps boost anybody who's lost their support or got too far. It's a nice big area.
Would you direct it, or can you just drop it down?
Just drop it on the point of a clash. So
Right.
again,
you.
if the arrow's the thing and we're moving towards them, drop it like here,
Yeah.
because that follows the movement.
Perfect.
It's again a light field, so you can also blast it for the extra cleanse, and then obviously you can run the cleanse mantra.
Do you ever use the Sword of Justice?
Not on Firebrand.
Right. Perfect. Thanks.
It's a DH skill in my mind.
Right.
Yeah, Wall of Reflection is also a nice skill. Like, it's another alternative in general, though. I would say you'll get more value out of Sanctuary, because even they have Unblockable, which is relatively common at this point, it'll pierce the reflection, whereas Sanctuary, you'll still break the push. Yeah, versus Cloud, it's a nice skill, and there is no alternative. You run the Stab Mantra. This is your biggest skill. I'll go into tomes now. Book 1 is purely for your 3. This is a pull pulls to center at range. Whenever your commander calls pulls, they're probably expecting Firebrands to add to the pull. Worst cases, you'll remove some stab. Best cases, you'll get some people and clump them, allowing your other pulls and your spikes to hit properly. And you should pretty much always be able to recover the pages, because it's a 900 range skill. Ashes of the Just, no, generally not, because you'll have the Hallowed Ground on most engages. For Firefields, you'll have Elementalists with their own, and the page investment's too much, because yours 3 is good because it's 900, so by the time you usually close the gap, you'll have most of the page investment back, whereas if you're engaging and dropping your Fire 4, you'll be losing pages that you'll be wanting to prioritize for your 3, 4, 5, and 3, and your 5 and 2. Just whenever a commander calls pools, they're probably expecting Firebrands to join as well, unless they specify a specific type of pull. General pools join in with Firebrand. The page investment's fine with this build. You have 3 extra pages over what a lot of groups run, which means you can essentially invest in a pre-casting of skills. When you go for the melee engage, you can spend the page on the pool there, because it'll strip enough and it'll be in a well bomb most of the time. You'll be pushing into wells, so you're almost guaranteed to get kills out of it. But if you don't have the pages or don't feel comfortable with pages, I wouldn't. Tome 2. Skills in Tome 2. Ignore the 1. The heal's nice, but the pages aren't worth it. 2 is a pretty good cleanse if you're getting caught or you're running retrieval, which I'll explain. 3, I never spend the pages. You have too much high priority, and healers will be covering it. The regen instantly gets overwritten by any proper healer. 4, it can be an okay skill to drop while bunkered if you're standing holding siege, and you can drop 4, switch switch to your shield cover, the siege, and then that just allows you to relieve quite a lot of targeted pressure. 5 is really good and usually underutilized generally because people run quickness over the extra pages, in my opinion, because it's 8 seconds of 20% heal bonus, which can't be stripped. Yeah, so Tome 2, your main skill you'll ever dip into it is 5, but during rotation you'll actually be picking up Tome 2 quite a lot. Tome 3. This is your most important tome. The one is just a little bit of protection swiftness. The only time I ever use it is when I'm walking Doliacs. Your 2, in general, if you're learning, avoid 2, because you can mimic the same effect but better with the Tome 1, page 3 most of the time. 4, this is the biggest skill, you should be using it on most pushes. It's a big resistance field, big light field, it's personal stun break. Most of the time when something's going wrong, you can probably solve it with Tome 3, page 4. 3 pulses, you want to generally get it close onto the push so that you can benefit from all 3 pulses of it. 5 is another big one. It's part of your stab rotation, it's good Aegis, protection's nice, and the extra toughness boost helps your squishies survive quite a few hits. It's also quick to cast. Now, cover more of the edge cases and where some of the things are. I'll run Advance because in general I would say Advance is the safest skill to run. The most important thing, the thing most Firebrands fail, and the thing that is the most noticeable is pre-stab. If you're not confident with ranges, I recommend you go to your settings, go to options, scroll all the way down, and enable lock ground target at maximum skill range. As Firebrand, you have access to most of the priority skill ranges, so you can use your own skills to measure things out. For example, whenever I'm moving, I'll just be holding my 3 out, and then I can lock it at 1200. 1200 is, if there's an enemy within that, an enemy group, I will be running stab at this point in the vast majority of cases. I won't be burning big stab. If we start moving close or I see them moving, it's okay to just pop an advance for the Aegis, or pop 1 charge of 3. Usually I'll run Aegis or advance. It recovers quickly enough, you will block Mesmer pools. Mesmer has no good access to unblockable stuff, and then it allows you to just remain a lot safer. The actual threat point is 900, which is here. This to Green Arrow is 900, it's 3 dodge ranges. This is where every single class's pools fit in. As soon as you're in 900, you need to make sure your party has stab up, because if the enemy is on the Green Arrow and they're a Reaper, they can cast their pull with just a small tap forward, greatsword, switch to 5, and they'll catch any member of your party they hit if you haven't provided Aegis. At 900, I would say you should be generally running 2 charges down at most times. You might think you're overexpending on stab, but it's better to overspend and keep your party alive. Yeah, you can run Hallowed Ground or use Tome 3. Of course, Tome 3 you're putting out on cooldown for passives, but you don't care about the passives for that anyway. That's 900 range. Just make sure you're locking it. Once you're at that range, you're in a lot more danger. People will be going for pools. As a Mesmer, I always look for people without stab. I'll tab through, click through. If I see someone without stab, I'll quickness my pull, and then I can catch them before Firebrand reacts. Generally pretty reliable. It's a lot easier on Reaper, because they can run unblockable with like a 20-second cooldown that they don't care about spending. Getting those initial pulls is what's going to lose a fight. Once you're 1 roll in at 600, which is here, a dodge roll is 300. If you ever really need to like figure out distances, it's a good metric to use. At this point, you need to be functioning much more. You'll probably be using your big stabs at 600, because either they're committing or you're committing. One of you will be trying to move this gap quickly at this point. While you're learning, I would still recommend just burning extra stab, or if you're more comfortable with it, Aegis. Aegis is effectively 1 stab, because it'll block the pull hit and not catch people, but unblockable pierces it.
Yeah, that's a problem at the moment with Reapers and stuff.
But once you're at 600, a lot of pools have probably gone. They'll be waiting for their second cooldown. So again, make sure you're rotating that 2 stab consistently, because it's about 25% uptime on the second thing, but you still have access to most of your tools. Of course, if you're committing, you pop big stab. That's you probably stand your ground. If you're going for a long fight, you'll hallowed ground onto it. If you're just going to take the initial bite, so if the commander's going to stop here, then you can save hallowed ground for a few seconds, making sure you're watching stab in case you're overstacking it. If you're overstacking it, that's bad. It's fine to begin with, but that's like where you can save a lot of your cooldowns and fully rotate. Quick summary is small stab, you'll be popping your 3. If you're going for engage, the commander will call for it. They'll usually say big stab, which will be either your stand your ground, or if they've said they're committing, you open tome 3, you open tome 2, you switch back to 3, you 4, you 5, and then you can finish it with not a 2, but usually a 3. Let's click that. The reason you switch to 2 there is because boon coverage is sort of a thing. In general, the way boons work in Guild Wars is the last boon you put on will be the first one that gets stripped off, or it'll be random. So in either case, you want to just bloat your boon bar, and you want stab to be the first one you applied. That way, when you open your 2, you're sticking quickness, resolution, and regen on top of the stat. So unless it targets stability directly or has a higher priority, of which the main skill that does that is Vindicators, they don't run that trait, you'll be covering your boons. So every time like you go for a push, I will always 3-2 back to 3, because that also adds the spacing, so you're burning through your initial stab before you're entering your later ones. You can add 1 to that for the additional might from that, but might will be under. You open tome 3, that gives you stab for commit and will stun break people that get caught. You can save it for the stun break, some people do, some don't. That's varied. And then you switch to tome 2 to just stack a lot of boons, back to tome 3, drop your 4, drop your 5. At this point, you'll have a decent number of these back. Like, you'll probably have third charge back. That's like the general approach I do on most pushes. Your staff is pretty much always managed by the commander. The biggest one is lines. You drop lines on a well. As soon as commander's called for a well spike, you should be dropping your lines on it, because anybody that still has their stability, hit the first line, it'll rip 1 stack of stability, grant them 1 second before they can be CC'd again by a stability based thing, and then they'll hit the far lines from the people at the front and get caught. I guess I should explain how stability works, as it's your main boon. I just did. Each stack of stability will grant you immunity to a second of CCs once it triggers. Gives you a small amount of protection. So if you have 1 stack, you run into a line, you won't drop, and then you can get to about here before you need a second stab. If you have more stacks, it'll just strip through and then you can continue running. If not, you'll get caught on the second one. That's why when a commander calls for lines, usually a few should be dropping them slightly beyond max range. So, for example, most skills are about the size, which is 300 diameter. You can check with 1 roll. It's worth a few of the Firebrands dropping lines at the front and a few at the back, so that you'll catch people on the separate instances of stability. At the start of a fight, your commander will call for empowers. Whenever you're empowering, you should drop swiftness first, because any other blast skills will be triggering it. You'll get some of the stacks, and you'll build up the swiftness while you're locked in your empower. Commander will quite often start moving around, just doing small movements to look for the engage. Once they find the opening, you can pop your advance to top up swiftness and give Aegis, while you close the 1200 to 900 gap. At 1500, you would generally have your passive tick, but you can bolster it with an advance. And then once the commander is looking to commit, you'll switch tome 3, get the stab, tome 2, tome 3, skill 4, skill 5. At this point, you can pop stand your ground in the engage if you're doing the full rotation out, because you'll have enough pre-stab here that you can use your big stab on the fight. But if a commander calls big stab, pop big stab. Doesn't matter what you're thinking, the commander needs to know their Firebrand skills are synced at this point. If it's obvious that they're not actually going to commit, you can save the cooldown. That's just game knowledge, you'll get the hang of it. But generally a commander knows what they're planning. Big stab is stand your ground's your biggest one. It applies the 5 stacks all at once, so you'll get through a lot of strip. And then pulling out your book and stacking the 5. People argue whether the tomes big small stab. I generally treat it as a bigger stab. It gives you enough stacks. Your small stab will generally just be your third mantra charge, or first. And then I often treat small stab as Aegis instead. You need to make sure that you're not going to be hit too much, that they burn through your Aegis. In general, just small stab is a mantra charge, big stab will be stand your ground. Tome 3 is best to just use on the engage and treat it as whatever you need at the time. Once you get into a fight on a Firebrand, you'll usually switch to your Mace Shield, your Staff, Holy Strike. You can just throw on a spike whenever a commander calls a spike. If you have Swiftness fully stacked and Circle of Swiftness available, you can join that on the spike, so you can just throw it out like that. 3, then 2, just in case somebody gets pulled in, you can cleanse something. It's just better to get into the hang of trying to work with Guild Wars combo system as much as you can. Always planning for it. But yeah, once you get in, you'll usually push with Mace 3. This is so that you'll burst the shield first, and then you'll give the protection and Aegis to everybody else on the push. It's just a nice big thing, and you're most likely to get it pop here. It's also the longest cooldown, most valuable skill of the ones you'll be using regularly, so you want it getting back onto cooldown as fast as you can. Once you're on the melee, you can drop your 2 to give the light field, so that bursts are catching it. You'll pop your 4 in between a mantra charge, usually, just to get the Aegis covering your stab. So like, you'll pop the, say you've been in the fight for a while, pop your 3, you don't have that anymore. Usually you'll stab up with your mantra, you'll drop your 2 to cover it with the regen. You'll then use your 4 to cover both with Aegis, and 1 you should be casting just generally whenever you have time, because your mace does a small amount of healing. It's not a huge amount, but it can save people. Shield 5 is a really strong skill. You want to pop it just before the end. Generally, you want to hold it quite a while. You'll be blocking a lot of projectiles with it. You'll be doing a lot with it. Just keep an eye on your stab. Feel free to burst it early if you need to get back into stab rotation. The reason I don't push with the Shield 5 most of the time is because it's the best way to help a commander withdraw. Because if you push with a 5, you'll get rid of a lot of stuff, but they're most prepared on the push. This is why I say it's generally okay to overspend early. You'll get more game sense the longer you play, be able to stop overspending, but they're going to have remaining unblockable charges. They're going to be able to pierce it. They're going to just be going through. Whereas if you pop it while you're on them, you get the initial knockback when they've already lost stab, you're in the sustained fight, and you can move away without needing to worry about most unblockables being back on cooldown. So when a commander is trying to withdraw, I always have my Shield 5 up, unless I'm running retreat. Of course, during all of this, you'll be rolling a decent amount, making sure you're staying properly on tag. You want to be as close as possible, and flicking your camera, because one thing I haven't covered is the range listed on your skills is in a cone in front of you. This is very important to know. It has a small radius around you, half a dodge, roughly. So say I'm on Bulgarian here. If I roll half, then jump back, I'll probably be hitting him a lot of the time with it here. But as soon as I'm here, you can see he's no longer getting the healing, because you have to aim the cone. So when you're running Firebrand, you want to be able to flick your camera pretty freely, pretty quickly, to make sure you're hitting with the cone for people being caught further back. So also, you can be slightly behind the commander on positioning. You still want to be as close to tag as possible. You want to be within, definitely within 1 roll. But like, being here means anybody fully on tag will be getting hit by the full extent of your cone. I guess I'll cover running retrieval. When you're running a retrieval build, you'll probably be running the quickness there, be running your res signet. I would still run pure voice if I'm running focused on retrieval. This is Mando goes for the engage. You hear people call no stab, being pulled, whatever, and then you're one of the players who know that you should stay on tag, focus on what's going on the tag, but you want to go help the person. So somebody gets pulled to purple, you see them go down, when you're running retrieval, you'll pop your heal skill, you'll run signet, you'll generally move over, cover them with 5. At this point, burn 1 stab, and then you get them back to the group as fast as possible. The main way you'll be successful is calling it on voice, so that, say, person's been caught, the commander will generally see if they want to respond. You can also say like covering tail. In that case, switching into tome 2 and using your 2 on them, they're going to get them out. So you'll generally do the rotation, you'll get your quickness, you'll signet them, you'll run over, you'll have your shield out, you'll stab them. If you see them get caught, pop your shield, enter 2, move back with them. If you can't save them, then you can't save them. But this is the generally most reliable way. This is also where you'll be using your button occasionally. When you're doing this though, you are lower pages. This is why generally I advise against running this specific thing. It's for people who can't help but help others and are confident enough in how they play and everything to save the tail. Shield 4 is another good skill for that. If you are gonna help people, help them properly rather than getting both of you killed. While you're new to it, biggest thing you need to take in for this is keep the pre-stab up. If you're within 1200, so the measuring trick, very useful. No threatening skill in the game actually has a longer range than 1200. Some skills can hurt at 1500, but they won't matter to a zerg provided like your healers are on top of it. You might get bursted, but as soon as you see the tick damage, you can roll back. 1200 is the like base. This is dangerous. 1500 is you need to focus up because one dodge roll closes that gap. Always keep your third stab cycling. There's no reason really to not do it, in my opinion. You have enough tools if you're running advanced to cover missing one stab. Rarely spend the second, that's your stun break. You need that. If you spend the third, don't worry too much, just make sure the commander is aware that you've run out because you do need a minute to re-engage, but you can still cover it decently with your Aegis. Pre-stab will be your third mantra charge on rotation. If you don't have that because your commander likes to dip in and out, then you can use a second one so long as you're confident you won't accidentally press it for the third, because you can still stun break with your tome 3. Or you'll use your tome 3, just pick it up and put it back down, get it on cooldown. That's okay too. But you want either your book or second charge of mantra to stun break when needed. You get used to it very quickly if you're playing Firebrand, that you can read whether or not you actually need to pre-stab, or a commander will call for it because they're starting to make movements to engage. Once you're in a fight, the biggest thing to take away is hallowed ground should be on cooldown the vast majority of the time. You should have pushed onto it. This will post most of your stab, giving you 8 seconds of recovering cooldown where you don't need to burn your other ones. If they well bomb, you can usually see where a hallowed ground is and just stay on the edge of it, not being in the wells. Get the tick back. Push on a reflect is always good. Make sure it's between you and the thing. When moving around, keep reflex between you. Pages are okay with the extra pages. Don't worry about it that much. As long as you're just focusing on the skills you're focusing on, or should be focusing on, you should have pages, in my opinion, running my build. On any kind of choke, there should be a Firebrand reflect. And then the other place to use it is on siege. If you have Vindicators, you wait for the Vindicator to cool energy out, or bubble going down, or you watch their tablet, and then you'll drop your reflect in between the two tablets, because the timing works out quickly that they'll have all their energy back from a single Firebrand, filling the gap. And that stops you being disabled, provided that they're not running unblockable. Do a quick rundown on the other two Firebrands. Won't be anywhere near as long because you play pretty similar on them. You just do the small changes. I'll cover Sally Firebrand, I'll cover really quickly. Gear-wise, you're obviously running Celestial on everything. You'll run Staff, Hammer. The Hammer is the main reason you're running Hammer is for the one skill. The rest are nice to have. But running the Celestial build, if you're in combat, you'll be chaining the 3 hits constantly, which is 100% protection uptime, always on top. You'll be covering pretty much every boon just by whacking things with a hammer. 2 is just nice for the blast finisher. You can cleanse with it, you can give might. It's pretty decent. Relatively short cooldown, allows teleport, but you rarely want to use that because you're badly positioned. The 3 is a very nice immob, quite a good skill. You can essentially use it on cooldown. You'll be using it on pushes quite often. A lot of the time it would be you'll be pushing into your circle of swiftness slightly behind the tag. The tag will hit the circle of swiftness. You'll leap in with your 2, blast it to cleanse, and then immob on the 3. 4 is not very useful. I recommend against using it. Most of the time you can just punish an individual if you see they have no stab and don't care, because the banish is pretty decent, but you do no damage with it. and you need to chain your 4 and your 2 in order to teleport, but you shouldn't really be teleporting that often. And 5 is a lightweight sanctuary. You drop it on a melee engage. It's another light field. You can blast with it using your staff 2 or your hammer 2, and it'll trap a few people. It's like a weaker version of a DH cage and melee only. In terms of runes, you run leadership. Leadership is boon duration and celestial stats, so all stats. It helps with the protection up time. I run bounty concentration on my staff, which is loads of concentration because you're running celestial, so you'll have less boon uptime. But on staff, it just allows you to stack the might and swiftness a bit higher, and you'll be building your stacks and switching to your staff quite a bit less than on minstrel. On the hammer, I tend to run quickness because part of the reason you're going celestial is aggression, so you'll be focusing on proccing traits, which is primarily you'll be going for quickfire, which is every time you have quickness you'll be burning for quite a lot because burning is a very high base damage on a firebrand. You'll be applying it pretty consistently. The rest of the trait is your symbols are slightly better because the third chain is a symbol, getting the extra stacks, getting the extra duration, making it slightly bigger. It's all very nice. Your core priority is still the same, stab and everything. Traits are just slightly more aggressive, going for a few more damage things, and you'll be going for the AoE burning from your Virtue 1 passive. You still want to cover your boons, you still want to stab with your 3. Of course, you're not taking the stun break on your 3, so make sure you're comfortable with when to use your mantras. It's just slightly nicer build for the permanent protection, easier coverage of boons, and playing slightly more aggressively. Mantra, you can run whatever, all the same skills still work here.
You cannot use Tome 1 though, right?
Yeah, you don't want to pick up Tome 1, because that'll put your passive on cooldown.
Yeah, because of permeating ref, yeah. So the focus is general stab still and a bit of damage. What's the stat combination again?
Full Celestial, a little bit more CC. You get quite a bit of damage from the burn, like even with Cleanse, because you're applying it so often, you'll be getting constant ticks in. It's just a slightly more pressure-y Firebrand.
With burning stuff, with stuff like that, I could recommend Wall of Reflection, because that permeating ref will reduce the number of attacks you need to do to cause burning from 4 to 3, and it will also cause an AoE instead of hitting one target. And if you put up a Wall of Reflections and enemies shoot into it, the reflected shots count as your attack. So basically, if a ranger pews a rapid shot or something into the wall, he will not only set himself on fire, but also the people surrounding him, because that permeating ref does an AoE and burn. That's actually that's a very nice skill to use with permeating ref, Wall of Reflection. But that's probably more for dedicated burning builds.
Yeah, that's more for Brand. Then the other thing is you just want to be trying to space out more of your quickness uptimes, because every time you're getting it, like there's the 7-second internal cooldown, you'll be giving Ashes of the Just, applying more burning to everything with quickfire. This build is very punishing on page economy. You need to generally don't bother with 2 at all. You don't pick up 1 because you'll be burning your permeating wrath, so you're losing the pools on it. You just use 3, often just 3, 4, 5. It's a decent build. I would still recommend the minstrel. I thought I would just cover it so that if you encounter people saying to run celestial, you know it more. And then Mantra of Law, it's just to help cleanse, because you're giving up a lot of access to support for the damage. You can run Wall of Reflection instead of it, be more aggressive. Runes you'll be running on the hammer is Rage and Celerity, which is quickness whenever you disable those. So on your 3, and on Banish, triggers on your 5 when you knock back with it, and quickness on every crit. You'll be critting a decent amount just from Celestial plus Fury, so that's just more quickness to apply more burning. Yeah, I would say run the Minstrel one, or you can run the third build, which I'll quickly cover, which is the Shattered Aegis build. This one's growing in popularity again. You will be running Mace and Shield. That's guaranteed. Don't swap to Axe. You're losing way too much Aegis application if you're running Axe. If you run Staff, that's the same as the standard Firebrand. Trait-wise, you're running pretty much anything that says Aegis is important. So you'll be running Wrathful Spirit because you're not using Scepter. The extra damage to burn, you're not actually burning that much. This tree, you're not running Condition, you're not using a Greatsword, doing Aegis, so you just go for the vulnerability. Shattered Aegis, this is the name of the build, so you take this trait. Every time your Aegis blocks, it does decent damage to 5 targets. For this build, you'll be running full Wanderers, you run Valor.
I believe it also does damage when the Aegis you supply to other people gets popped, because you often see a shit ton of hits.
Yeah, it's any Aegis you applied. The core build is the synergy between the communal defense and Shattered Aegis. That's just a little bit extra Aegis, it's free. You're not running focus, passive is nice, but the healing skill, just cleansing, is good because it's more consistent.
You can put out a shit ton of Aegis with this build. The nice thing, the selling point in my opinion of that build is that it's easier to pace your powers, because you want to have Aegis, and when it gets popped, you apply another one. For example, I apply it, then say Grusha hits me, my Aegis gets popped, and everyone around me gets damaged. And when I see that, I immediately put up the next Aegis. So it's easier to pace your powers. Even though the stat set you're using is much less defensive than Minstrel, but it's actually, I found, not much less durable, in my opinion.
Because Aegis doesn't care how much damage. I especially like Shattered Aegis. With Arctivider being such a prevalent thing, Aegis is eating 14,000 damage per thing it blocks from a Berserker. Suddenly, you're accounting for more stat by just any
Yeah, and
application.
nobody will see that on any stats. Your good deeds will go unrewarded.
Most important trait is Communal Defense. Be aware it's got 15-second internal cooldown, but whenever your Aegis pops, you apply Aegis to everybody else. 5 targets, it's a dodge roll, so it's a pretty big area. This is a very nice visual build because you get a lot of feedback when things are triggering, when your internal cooldowns are cycling, because suddenly it's pretty big glowy effect when you're applying Aegis to people. Trait here, every Aegis is getting you more Aegis, the choice, because you're not running meditations, and the heal for boon can be nice, but you're getting so much Aegis out of it, you run that. Extra pages versus quickness is, I still think, just completely up to you. I prefer the extra pages, you can get more utility, you'll be getting more Aegis from having consistent, reliable access to this, even if you overspend. Gives you more pulls, so you can play slightly more aggressively, pulling to your feet, forcing them to pop the Aegis on you, but quickness is always beneficial. If you want it, if your party wants it, you can run it. And Tome 2, you just go for the quickness, it's generally the best choice. The numbers are too low, your regen will always be overwritten, and you're not slowing. You should never be burning your last mantra, ideally. If something's going wrong, or if you're very heavily pressured, that might trigger, but just run quickness. As always, the extra 2 seconds off every countdown is too important. You might see the top trait and wonder why you're not running it, because it means your 3's not going on cooldown, so you're getting the Aegis, but you're only getting 1 Aegis every 30 seconds from running Stoic Demeanor. The resistance can be good from it, like you're not running CC here, you're not running CC on any of your utilities, your only source of triggering it is Tome 1, page 3, and Tome 3, page 2, which you don't want the extra pages still. Gear-wise, if you're going more aggressive, run Wanderer stats, you're still plenty tanky, and you're boosting base power. Shattered Aegis can't crit, so any ferocity built into it is a waste. Yeah, you'll boost your little damage, but that's not why you're running this build. You're running it for the synergy of Aegis breaking and application, just making sure that you're giving loads of people the defense. Can run Force, it's base thing. If it hits a stab, they don't get disabled, so it doesn't trigger. It has to actually apply the effect. Of course, Immobilize isn't affected by stab, so that needs cleanse.
All powers which trigger on disable only count if a power actually works. If step prevents it, then it doesn't fire. Same with, say, Spellbreaker. When you disable an enemy, you strip or something. That also only works if you actually interrupt the enemy.
And then obviously if you're running Shattered Aegis, you run Advance. You need the extra Aegis, it's just a core part of everything. It's constant application. Shattered Aegis, I would generally try and make sure you're in a party with a Chronomancer. If there is one, a lot of them will be running Alacrity, and with Alacrity you can get a lot of uptime on cycling your Aegis skills. You play like a standard Firebrand pretty much the entire time, because you're still running most of the same skills, like you're more aggressive, so you don't roll for healing, but the main thing is just trying to make sure you're more in their face and keeping the Aegis rotation up more. Your stab rotation will be an underlayer. You still want to focus on it, you still pre-stab the same. Personally, I would bias towards spending the extra stab over the Aegis on this build, just because the Aegis gets multiplied in its effectiveness the more in their face you are, because you'll be giving the resistance, the fury, the protection, and it'll be blocking more attacks. Yeah, I think that's all three builds that I would recommend. In terms of what I recommend running, if you're learning Firebrand, run the standard Minstrel one. It's the least punishing. You can burn things a lot more aggressively, just focusing on the start of engages, and then you'll have enough generation of Aegis and pages that you can usually support through most fights. Then I would generally say Shattered Aegis is probably the next one I would run, just because the extra Aegis application is a lot more defensive than it gets credit for. It can stop a lot of big hits and pulls, and it's like so clear feedback compared to a lot of Firebrand stuff. You know when your skills are properly working. You're always in party view. Every time you're in party view, you need to be making sure your stabs like properly being chained. You're not constantly overstacking it with a normal Firebrand. Whereas Shattered Aegis, you look at the Aegis on your bar. If you don't have Aegis on bar, you put Aegis on bar.
Yeah. Whatever you do, pre-step. I mean,
Yeah.
if you master the art of pre-stepping, you are already better than 50% of all the other Firebrand. If you got that down, that's so life-saving. It's just one click for you, and it may save up to 5 people's lives. And also may win you the battle. I mean, as exaggerated as it sounds, when the enemies start the pulse, they will usually be unblockable. So step is the only thing which can, apart from dodging obviously, but if that person doesn't dodge, it will be only thing saving that person's life, because if you have people who are running less cannon builds like berserkers and stuff, they get pulled, they're dead, no questions asked. And if you start the combat with like 4 or 5 people down, you will probably lose against the Zerg of equal strength, and it's just one click basically to prevent that. I mean, it may seem tedious sometimes, but that's one of the most important applications to start the combat with.
You need the pre-stab. Like, it's not an over-exaggeration at all to say if you don't pre-stab, you can throw a fight before you even start. Pre-stab is by and far the most important thing, and if you have to, play the entire game holding down your 3 key on your staff to measure the 1200. If we lose 5 on the initial thing, that's still a full party of people who are dead, unable to contribute. If they had a berserker, we've just lost potentially 10% of our damage. So you need to be on top of pre-stab. If you're not fighting a good group, it gets easier and easier as the fight goes on at the start. They'll have all their unblockables hitting you, they'll have all their pools ready, they'll have all their CCs, and they'll have their welt bomb. If you can just keep your party alive up until like the first proper committed, so you've entered staff, you've gone through your staff rotation, you've got through the hardest part. You just need to keep the rotations going as they pop up, making sure coming up, and it will just get easier and easier.
Firebrand is sort of a resource game. I mean, you have several applications of step. Be sure not to burn through them too quickly, but also not too slowly. I mean, if you use them too quickly, your party will be and you will be screwed then after you run out. But you have already been in the fight for like 20 plus seconds, which might be enough time to win the fight anyway. But if you skimp on people, you may not even last that long, or your party will not. If you are new or inexperienced with Firebrand, like always feel free to ask people with party chat, so your subgroup, ask your subgroup how the step is. If they say I constantly get pulled and stuff, then you probably have to be a bit more spendy with your step. If they say everything's okay, then you're doing just fine. It's not a bad thing to ask your subgroup. I mean, if you have a lot of combats, then people get a good grip on how good it's working on the average what you're doing.
You have a lot going on with Firebrand.
Yeah, and you don't always see. I mean, you cannot. I mean, oh right. Another tip which I recommend is switching the view to party view. Turn the grid off and watch your party instead. You can see all the booms of your party, which is more important than seeing if a zerg is dying or not. That's something you cannot affect in any way most of the time, but you can affect that your party is up and fighting.